All right. After the break, we are joined by someone that is familiar to the Iowa fan media podcast landscape. His name is Steve Deace. You know him probably from Deace and Miller, which is a little bit before my time. I'm 27, Steve, so I'm a little younger than the.
You're killing me already, brother. But yeah, I hear you.
The podfathers of Iowa football and sort of, and John Miller is really a guy that I respect, and you guys were very well liked when you guys were still doing that show. A show that continues today, right? Bigger 10.
Yep. We do it Bigger 10. It's on YouTube now. You can watch that every single week. You bet.
Yep. And not only that, but he runs the Michigan podcast, or just Michigan podcast, as a Michigan native. So we have brought Steve on today to help us do a little reconnaissance on the opponent. Steve, neither of us were supposed to be here today. Going into Saturday, it was going to be an Ohio State, Wisconsin Big Ten championship, which we've seen all too often over the last decade. And then things flipped, and somehow Iowa pulled off a miracle comeback in Lincoln. Michigan gets over the hump, which is where I kind of want to start. As a Michigan fan, 2 games out of the last 2 decades for the Wolverines. What was it like to get over that hump finally with Harbaugh?
Well, first, let me say this. My producer, Aaron, is a huge fan of your podcast.
Okay? Oh, great.
He's a lifelong Iowa fan. So if I did not mention that, he was going to shut my mic off on the show tomorrow. So I wanted to make sure to give you guys some recognition with that. But,
well, that's fantastic.
But just to show you what it was like, I made the decision after what happened in 2019. So in 2018, we were favored in Columbus for the first time in 20 years. And it was Urban's last game. And we didn't just get embarrassed, guys. We got emasculated. They took our manhood from us, and they could have put up 70. They called the dogs off with 8 minutes to go, and they hit a 60 burger. In 2019, we changed the offense, tried to get more like Ohio State, frankly, and we had not had a single 300-yard passing day, only one actually in the Harbaugh era. Then we had 3 in a row, and it looked like we were ready to go. They embarrassed us again on our own field, and that's what I did, something I've never done before as a Michigan fan. I turned the Michigan-Ohio State game off before its conclusion.
Wow.
And my son and I, we just went to the theater to see Creed 2. We had both agreed our testosterone levels were dangerously low after witnessing. Okay. And I vowed after that, I'm never watching another one of these games live ever again until Michigan shows me it's a rivalry. It was turning me into a fan I don't want to be, where it felt like no matter what we did the rest of the year, it was a failure, and I'm bitter and I'm angry. Jim Harbaugh was my favorite player growing up as a kid. And I didn't like the person it made me. So I just decided I just have to eject. So I'm not watching it again. I already made arrangements to go to the movies, went and saw Ghostbusters Afterlife, recorded the game just in case they won, but I did not watch it live. And I was ready for the Rose Bowl, man. I was already making arrangements to go out there, figured after we beat Penn State, we'd be the highest ranked Big Ten team, not in the playoff. And so I was already making arrangements, my son and I, to go to the Rose Bowl. We were really excited about that. And I had no idea what happened in the game, kept my phone and everything off, went and enjoyed Ghostbusters. I get home, watched the game on the DVR, and I'm just going to tell you, man, it was emotional. And I was like, seriously, like in tears afterwards.
That's awesome.
Noah and I gave each other like a huge man hug after, and he's going to be 15 in February. And he went from going as Jim Harbaugh for Halloween twice in a row. Okay. To he barely watches, every basketball game we watch together. He barely will watch Michigan football. And he was going to go to the movie with me and made the decision at the end. You know what? I need to give him one more chance. So he stayed behind to watch it live. And we were both it just restored our faith as fans that, and it made it fun again, I guess is the best way I would describe it.
On your Bigger 10 confidence points segment, I believe you gave 6 points to Ohio State over Michigan, which I think speaks to this almost not giving up, but setting aside of your fandom. And you're a stronger fan than most, because many just, they put themselves through it and it turns them into people. Sometimes we take shit on our podcast because people are like, why are you yelling at us for being fans? And it's because sometimes it gets too far. And so it's interesting that you just put it on the DVR. What happened? Well, I mean, what was this Michigan team able to do that past weren't?
So early in the week, I listened to a bunch of sports handicapping podcasts I typically listen to because I like dabbling in that for fun.
Sure.
And I listened and I only listen to guys that over the last few years have proven to be really good at this. Okay. And they all said the same thing about the game. They all said, well, you know, when I look at my own power ratings, this should be a 2 or 3 point line, but you have to bet Ohio State. And I started thinking about this. Just let me take my fan hat off, because sometimes as fans, we forget that you can have a negative bias.
Yeah.
Like when you've had your scrotum kicked in, you know, Miller and I used to call these scrot kicks. Okay. when you get your scrotum kicked in so many times in a row, it can have you now you're the fan who's like, here we go again. The first sign of adversity, first incomplete pass, right? Because now you're damaged. And I started wondering, now, no way a handicapper, when their own numbers are showing it should be a 2 or 3 point spread and the line is 8, nobody is going to voluntarily lay another 6 points than what their own lines say. In fact, they would hammer that thinking they have found a market inefficiency.
Right.
And then I watched as 94% of the money came in on Ohio State, and the line never went down. That's not how it typically works. That's Vegas is willing to assume that liability. They're fine with it. They're fine taking all that one-sided action. So just as a hedge against myself, I put $100 down on Michigan plus 250. Needless to say, that paid off very well. Okay. And I think if you look at why Michigan's analytics are so strong, this is not the most talented team that Jim has had. The 2019 team or 2016 team you guys beat that night, 19 players from that roster were in NFL training camps the next July.
Stacked.
19. All right. We're not going to have 19 guys in NFL training camps this July because most of our best talent is actually in the 20 and 21 recruiting classes.
Yep.
All right. But the talent is more equally dispersed. If you look at the receivers on that 2016 team you guys beat, none of those guys, including Amari Darboh, Iowan, I've met members of his family, great kid, would not start on this team. I mean, those guys didn't play much in the NFL. The level of speed and athleticism on the outside, dramatically better. Hassan Haskins is, if Devion Smith was a CrossFitter. The level of athleticism, it's a similar running style, but just a different level of athleticism. And we didn't have any backs like Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum with that kind of explosiveness. I mean, you guys saw Corum busted off a 57-yarder on an ankle and a half against Ohio State. And then if you look at the rest of the team, it's just the weakest spot on the team, I guess I would say weakest, is the quarterback. And the starter has a lifetime 17-3 touchdown to interception ratio. Jeez. And his backup is a 5-star that had about 50 offers and was the starting quarterback for the IMG Academy last year. So this is a well-balanced team. But here's the thing though, guys, and this is what's key is whenever coaches are going to like purge staff, that's usually 95% of the time, that means their ass is fired in a year. And typically there's a difference between reacting in leadership and being reactionary. A lot of times when coaches make these moves, it's reactionary. I got to throw it. I'm throwing this guy into the volcano to save my own job. Like what Dan Mullen tried to do at Florida last week, for example. Scott
Frost, Nebraska
is another example. Yeah. Because now reacting is now where you include this is where what your football coach did after, regardless of what you think of the merits of the claims or the controversy or what the actual issues were, the fact that those things even came to the forefront would have sunk most coaches and programs.
100%.
All right.
Yep.
And then you start 0-2 after that. Holy cow. Okay. And I think this is now where I'm not just going to throw Chris Doyle into the fire, but I'm actually going to do this introspectively and look at myself. Are there things, even if I think much of this is overblown, are there things that I could, because I have been doing this since 1998, are there things maybe I could update? Maybe things I don't understand. I've been doing this since before there was iPhones. And Jim, this is what Brian Kelly did at Notre Dame. That's the only other example I can think of in recent times where a coach midway reinvented himself and it succeeded. And Jim did this. He didn't just throw Don Brown overboard, but he went back to Mike Hart, who he had a long running feud with, back to when Jim said Michigan's academics were overrated when he was coaching at Stanford. And Mike Hart was a player then and went after him by name. He went back and humbled himself and reunited that relationship and brought him home. And there was just a level of maturity here, humbleness, frankly, that I think he recognized when he couldn't escape to the NFL last December, that his stock was pretty low, that he couldn't go back to the NFL now. And I think he's like, you know what, man, I gotta look at the man in the mirror here. Something's not right. And then he looked at the culture of the team. And where's the win for Michigan? Where's the win for one another? You know, I've watched a ton of Michigan games where our guys get their helmets ripped off and stuff, and the Michigan players just go back to the huddle. And then you see our podcast network with old school guys like Doug Skeen, who, you know, won 4 Big Ten championships when he played here, cussing his brains out, losing his mind. That's not how we play football in Michigan. Your teammate's helmet gets ripped off and you just jog back to the huddle. That'd have been an effing fist fight when I played. And Bo would have said, last minute's running the most. Okay. And then you saw the reaction Saturday when that happened. And you saw our offensive linemen go over and corner those guys and start intimidating them. You saw the way our players followed them into the tunnel at halftime and just badgered them and hammered them and the whole way into their locker room. That's what Michigan football used to look like. It used to look like, frankly, Iowa football with higher recruited players is the best way I can explain it. Okay? Absolutely. And that's the way it looked for 30 plus years. And that's why it won a hell of a lot of games. And it hasn't looked that way. And it's not scheme so much as it was culture. And I think that's what Jim had to admit is he's responsible for that. And that we had turned into this NFL training factory. Like last year when we weren't going to play in the Big Ten, Michigan announces they're going to do a pro day. Ohio State didn't even do that. Okay. We did a great job of getting guys prepped for the NFL, not a great job of winning significant games. And I think Jim finally realized, what did I do wrong here? And I've got to be, if I'm not a father figure, I at least got to be Uncle Buck, man. I'm not involved in my kids in the off season. You know, they don't speak of me as a leader. I'm just a football coach. And so, you know, recruits now come into the house, kids now having an opportunity to, you know, we had one of our defensive starters, I think it was Brad Hawkins, said that the last 2 years under Don Brown, if he had a question or issue with the scheme, he was not permitted to address it with him.
Wow.
These are all, so I think what Jimmy did is he changed the culture and realized it's not about bells and whistles. You have too many advantages at Michigan. It's about what you do and what you can control. And I think you've seen, you give him a lot of credit for that humility and doing something about it.
Culture is a buzzword for sure. And it's one that a lot of people on the outside, from a former player's perspective, just don't, and it's not their fault. It's very, very hard to grasp how much a culture determines results and the little things like how they react if a helmet gets pulled off, the togetherness of I'm not letting a guy get hit in the mouth without a response. Right. Those, you know, when you see guys starting to fight for each other, and that makes a lot of sense because this team does feel balanced all the way outside of the statistical stuff to the culture side of things. And they're playing good football at the right time. This is, you mentioned the 2016 game. I snapped the ball on the Keith Duncan kick to beat you guys. This game is a close one, almost always. It's rare. I have the entire history of Iowa, Michigan, which is heavily favored to the Michigan side, but it is hard to find some serious beatdowns. It's a very close thing all the way back to when Harbaugh was quarterback. Of course, we all know the history. Is there some element of that in a Michigan fan's mind going into this Big Ten championship, even though it's a 10.5 point line or wherever it sits now today, that just because of this matchup and this in the history of this rivalry, that it might feel a little closer than it is on paper?
I don't see how there couldn't be, knowing the history that you just talked about. I mean, you go back to October 19th, 1985, 1 versus 2. Michigan's number 2 in the nation, loses to Iowa. Only lost that year, finished number 2 in the country. We've already referenced that 2016 game several times where I think Michigan had just beaten Maryland like 59-3 or something. And it wasn't that close the week prior, and then goes on the road and just makes mistakes and puckers.
And we had gotten embarrassed at Penn State the week before.
Right. And I think, you know, in the 80s and 90s when this happened, it's because Hayden Fry changed the Big Ten because of the scheme that he brought to the league. He was the first coach to really come here and bring modern NFL style, pro style offenses. And that's really, and then other coaches came along later, Mike White at Illinois and others, and emulated that. And that opened up the conference from the Big Two era in the 80s. And then a decade later, I think Joe Tiller did that at Purdue when he brought kind of the air raid to the league and kind of democratized it a little bit more. So I think with Hayden, it was innovations. And I think what's happened under Kirk is the solidity of culture. It's why Michigan made, from what I understand, from the Michigan side, 2 different attempts after Lloyd Carr retired to lure him here.
Really?
As the coach. Yeah. So it's what frustrates Iowa fans sometimes, that I kind of know what every situation is, but it's what frustrates opponents. Crap, we know what they're going to do every situation.
Yeah.
And that's where I think this Michigan team might be a little bit less inclined to succumb to that, because if there's anything this team is, it's comfortable in its own skin. That it has an established brand. To me, the bigger challenge on the Michigan side is what just happened is it's the 1980 U.S. Olympic team, and we just beat the Soviet Union. The problem is people forget that wasn't the gold medal game. Okay.
Yeah.
They had to come back 2 days later and play Finland, who's also pretty damn good, for the gold medal. And I think that's the issue. If the one thing that I think helps Michigan here is the uncertainty and inconsistency that Iowa has at quarterback. Even if there were a CJ Beathard or Ricky Stanzi level of quarterback here, that was at least a known commodity that you knew what he could execute effectively and consistently. This would be a perfect opportunity to get up like 10-0 early and then see if Michigan gets a little rattled. Yeah. Okay. But the fact that Iowa doesn't really have that at quarterback, I think will give Michigan maybe a little more time to get punched in the mouth a couple of occasions and realize, oh crap, yeah, we didn't win anything last week. We just earned our pride back.
I would say this Michigan team has a full 60 minutes to get punched in the mouth, and they still all are going to have the opportunity. This one, we talked a little bit on our recap of the weekend that came out today. It's not going to be a game like the following year after we beat you guys. We murdered Ohio State, just an absolute anomaly of a game in Kinnick Stadium. It's not going to be one of those because this team isn't built that way. This team is oddly enough built like 99% of teams are not. They win games on special teams and defense.
Right.
And they drag like a dead body, the offense along. And the quarterback situation, I couldn't even tell you what we have at quarterback. Nobody knows. It's just this very bland product. It looks like we're going to be going with Petrus. So, for your guys' sake, he's the more seasoned guy, but he's also the less mobile guy. I'm looking at the stats here, and I see Hutchinson and Ojabo lead the league 1-2 in sacks, and that doesn't bode well for Petrus or this young offensive line that we have. And that's probably our biggest concern heading into the weekend. You guys lost one game this year. Michigan State gave up 37 points. I believe that was a 37-33 game. What was it about the Spartans game this year that they were able to figure out the Wolverines?
So that game was 30-14 with about 6 minutes to go in the third quarter. And that was with a controversial call before the half where Aiden had done a strip sack recovery in the end zone. And it clearly looked like it was a fumble, and they took it off the board and we had to settle for a field goal. We were in total control of that game. We were out rushing them at that point. We were actually on pace for over 500 yards. We still hit 500 yards against them in that game. What happened in that game is that I think was another culture loss where Michigan State, there is really an Iowa State sort of a dynamic here. And I was very close to Dan McCarney when he was coach at Iowa State, former Hawkeye, of course.
Yep.
I had intimate access to the Iowa State program, and Dan always did coach regardless of what he told y'all in public. Dude, the Iowa game was like a bowl game in September. That game was coached differently every year. Iowa State played with a ruthless, reckless abandon defensively that they didn't play the rest of the Big 12 season.
It still is, by the way.
And it still probably is a little bit. All right. And I think that Michigan thought the game was over when it was 30-14. And Michigan State was like, dude, we're going to, we can't go out like that. We can't get punked. And they made like 4 plays on 4th downs that preserved drives. And those were all the drives that they scored their touchdowns and 2-point conversions on to win. And I think that game actually helped teach Michigan a lesson that it played for the rest of the season. That I think Michigan realized we have not peaked yet. This isn't good enough. We won at Wisconsin. We won at Nebraska. Those are games we've typically lost, particularly in Madison against Wisconsin. This game we had circled all along. We didn't want to get punked by these guys again, and they did. And I kind of think, at Michigan, my whole life, there's always a temptation to go, if you know your Rocky 3. Sorry, I'm the old guy, so I'll make old school.
No, you're good. I know Rocky 3.
Okay? Michigan's always facing a temptation to go between Clubber Lang to Rocky. All right. Where they're working out at Gold's Gym with the hotties doing photo ops, and the other guys are out there doing chin-ups on pipes in the basement. Okay.
I love that. That's a fantastic analogy. I love that.
Well, thank you. And that's Michigan State with their 40 new players and 25 transfers and second-year coach. Okay. They never lost that edge. And I think that game, after that game, Apollo showed up and said, dude, we got to take you back downtown to the hood where you came from and teach you how this works. All right. We got to get the eye of the tiger back.
Yep.
And so now what I'm worried about, though, is I've never seen an atmosphere like that at Michigan State. And Matt Leinart said afterwards it was the best atmosphere he's ever been in for a college football game as a player or an analyst or a fan.
Wow.
I've never seen a post-game celebration like that at Michigan ever. I mean, like ever. I just wonder, what's going on today?
Yeah.
And I know when Matt Campbell took over at Iowa State, I didn't think he was actually a good hire. I kept those people bring those tweets up and use them against me. I'm fine when I'm dumb. That was dumb. Okay. And he had this cliche win in the dark. You guys might remember some of those hashtags.
Yep.
Okay. All that stuff actually, except when he plays y'all, has all turned out to be true. Okay. True. Michigan won this season in the dark.
Yeah.
They won the game. They won this season in January and February when we all wrote them off and thought Jim Harbaugh was just whistling past the graveyard and 12 months from being replaced probably by Matt Camp. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
And now though, they've got the spotlight and everybody's on him. And now the same media that said Jim Harbaugh sucked, they're like, I'm so happy for him. Mm-hmm. I just wonder what that dynamic is like. And that's why from a Michigan fan perspective, I am grateful you don't have a more solidified quarterback position, because I do think this is a game where you could potentially get to a 10-0 quick lead and put Michigan back on their heels a little bit. And then does Michigan get out of their game plan and start doing things that's uncharacteristic for them, right?
It's funny you say that. And when you describe it that way, it's how I, as an Iowa fan, felt against Nebraska last week. Nebraska's always got this, I'm a little worried about them, right? Even if they're 3-8. And similarly, their quarterback situation was in question. Logan Smothers had to come in and play. And I feel, and it's particularly because of Iowa's defense, but I just always felt like I think we'll always be in it, similar to how I think Michigan, no matter how this game goes early on, is always going to be in it. But if you let a team hang around, it gets dicey. And if you let Iowa hang around, they've proven that they can make it dicey. 2016, we took off on a speed train against Ohio State when they let us hang around, and we've done it several times to other teams since. It's going to be one of those situations of, I don't know if we can get up 10-0 early. I know this, and this was one of the questions I had for you. Because I wasn't really, it's hard to judge just by statistics. How is Michigan on special teams? Because Iowa is fantastic, and they 2 weeks in a row really have won the game because of special teams.
If you look at all in fact, I was just putting together our all Big Ten teams for Bigger Ten, and I went back and forth between Caleb Shudak and Jake Moody for first team kicker. And I decided to split and if you look at the top 2 returners, they're Charlie Jones and AJ Henning for Michigan.
Okay.
So yeah. I just decided to split the difference, and I gave us the kicker, and I put Charlie Jones as the returner.
Nice.
I think these are the 2 best special team units in the league. I think if you look at Football Outsiders and Pro Football Focus analytics, Michigan special teams are very strong. This is where their depth comes into play, with the recruiting depth.
Yep. A
lot of promising youngsters. You might remember the 2016 game you played in. Devin Bush was on that game on punt coverage, and then he was a Butkus Award winner 2 years later.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a lot. They are always a threat to block kicks. Henning is a little scary sometimes in how he catches the ball. He was not the original returner. Ronnie Bell was. He's a more explosive athlete than Ronnie Bell is, but he does make me nervous a lot in how he catches the ball. But you're talking about a guy that averages about 10 yards a clip on a punt return. The punt game, we have an excellent special teams unit all the way around. Cool. To me, the game that were Iowa's best chance to make the game that they want it to be is to see. There was a moment in the game Saturday where, watching it on the replay, the only time the whole game I said, here we go again. And Michigan got off to the quick start that I thought we would get off with the emotion and everything else. And then we got the great, they made a special teams mistake. We had them pinned deep, you remember? Mm-hmm. And then we get a 3-and-out, and we've got excellent field position. And Cade McNamara does something he rarely does, starts feeling himself a little bit. Frankly, the big criticism we have, we'd like to feel himself more. He takes too few risks, if anything. Sure. Okay. But he thinks he has JJ McCarthy's arm, and he doesn't. And he tries to fit it into that window over the middle in front of the goal line, and it's picked off, right? That was the only time in the whole game I thought to myself, okay, we had our moment to go up 14-0, and we just blew it. Here we go. If that's Iowa's best shot, is for Phil to put 17 guys at the line and say, I don't care if Cade McNamara throws for 400 yards. I'm not contributing to this Hassan Haskins for Heisman campaign today. We're not doing that today. Yeah, because Cade gets a little greedy and thinks I'm feeling a throw that's not there. And then Iowa's, Riley Moss, and you get a touchdown that way that you couldn't get on offense. Right. This is the game. The more often that Iowa has to start the game outside of plus territory, the less likely Iowa's going to win the game, I believe.
100%. Yeah. Our ability to sustain very long drives is potentially the worst stat that we have this season. If we can get the ball in short fields, obviously Torrey Taylor in the punt game, forcing you guys to have 90+ yard drives, that's going to be massive. Love to see, as a former specialist myself, kickers and punters in a dome where the weather doesn't matter. There's no excuses. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be exciting to watch Moody and Shudak and Torrey Taylor and everybody do their thing. Field position is going to determine this game, I think. And
did I say Jones and I meant Miller? I'm sorry about that. Forgive me.
No, you're good. You're good. Okay. And field position is going to determine this game, and then the turnovers, right? Like if we can force, and we've done it to guys all season, I think we lead the country in interceptions still. If we can force a couple of those and win the field position game, I think that's how we get the Wolverines to be deep in the third quarter and think, oh shit, we're in a dogfight. And Iowa's obviously good in a dogfight. Like you said, win in the dark. We'll see if Michigan is also good in a dogfight if it comes to that. I think a lot of Iowa fans are hoping it just does. Steve Deace on the Washed Up Walk-Ons. Thank you so much for joining me today to help preview the title game, Steve.
You bet. You guys must have quite the audience, man. I heard from, when you sent the invite out on Twitter, I heard from a ton of people in my feed who are like, you should do this. We definitely dig the show. I mean, I heard of it from my producer, Aaron. So congratulations to you guys' success and your audience. And I appreciated the invite. Early in my career, can I tell you a very quick story before
Absolutely. Go ahead.
So early in my sports media career in Iowa, I was with the sports radio station that went bankrupt.
Okay.
And the former sports radio station I was with, that ending did not end amicably.
Sure.
And so they took a bunch of shots and stuff at me in the newspaper. I'm overrated. I'm not the brightest bulb in the chandelier. Not that I have all these quotes memorized, but I do. Okay. And it was 20 years ago. All right. But I'm really young.
Hey, Steve's winning. You're winning in the dark over there.
I'm winning in the dark. Well, the next day after this all goes down and it's all in the newspaper is Iowa Football Media Day. Mm-hmm. And the way they used to do it, where we'd all meet at that hotel, by the mall, have a big banquet. I'd have lunch with Norm Parker every year because Norm was from Michigan, and we didn't talk old Michigan, Iowa, Michigan State, where he was formerly at. War stories. Norm and I had a great relationship for several years when he was at Iowa. So I'd always have lunch with Norm, and then we'd go down to the practice field and interview the players when it was 7,000 degrees. And I'd get a parking ticket every time, no matter where I freaking parked. He'd always hammer me. Okay?
Hey, join the club, baby.
So we're getting ready to go into the lunch during the banquet, and Kirk comes up to me and sits down next to me, and he puts his arm on my shoulder, and he's holding the newspaper, and it's the article about me getting canned and getting destroyed by my former employer.
Oh man!
And down and he goes, I got to tell you, Steve, I remember when I got fired with the Ravens and it was like the worst. I thought at the time it was like the worst moment of my life. I wasn't sure about my future in coaching. And, I ended up I went FCS, what was 1AA still back then, and kind of had to, build myself back up. And now I'm in Iowa. I've got my dream job. He's like giving me a pep talk. Okay. Now this was 2002. So he's on the brink of his breakthrough season. He hasn't done it yet. All right. Wow. Let alone all the success that he has. Above me on the wall, I don't know if the camera can pick it up or not. I mean, I've got pictures of Ferentz with, my children when they were babies. I have, I've never been an Iowa fan, as most of your audience is going to know.
Yep.
But I have spent a lot of time early in my career when I did sports exclusively around Kirk and around your program, 100% class act. And I just wanted to reiterate to your audience, here I am. I'm not even a fan. I'm a member of the enemy media. And he hasn't really, he can't even figure out how to get his buyout done with Bob Bowlesby yet, because they're still arguing about that. All right. And yet he comes up, picks me out, comes up and makes a point of giving me a pep talk. It'll be 20 years next August since that happened. And I have never forgotten it. And it really, really helped me get through a difficult time. And I just wanted to share that story here in front of a large audience of Iowa fans on the podcast.
That's incredible. And it doesn't surprise me. We've had, we had a manager on one time, and he said something like the first day he walked in the complex, Coach Ferentz was the first one to greet him and already knew the guy by name, hadn't even started with the program yet. Mm-hmm. Coach Kirk Ferentz has a unique, almost magical ability to be personable. And, it's part of the reason why we're so die hard for him as former players with me and my two co-hosts. And a story like that is it's just one of those that comes up. You're like, wow, just the guy just proves it over and over again. So, and Harbaugh echoed that, I think, in his media comments earlier this week. So I'm really excited. Michigan's first appearance in the title game will be Iowa's second since the inception in about a decade ago. So very excited for this matchup. And again, Steve, thank you for joining us so much.
You bet, man. Take care, guys. Go Blue. God bless. Merry Christmas, everybody. And good luck every game except Saturday.
Yes. We'll be back in a second.